I was savoring my morning coffee, the rich aroma filling the air, when something utterly bizarre caught my eye out near my barn. At first, I actually rubbed my eyes, wondering if the caffeine hadn't quite kicked in yet, or if I was simply seeing things. But no, there they were, rows upon rows of stark white folding chairs, delicate floral arches that looked completely out of place against the weathered wood, and a ridiculously long buffet table stretching along the side of my barn. A wedding? On my property? I squinted, setting my mug down with a soft clink as I stepped onto my porch, needing a better look to process this unbelievable sight. That's when I saw them, the catering staff, bustling around with trays piled high with food that smelled divine, a small group of people meticulously arranging centerpieces on the tables, and the unmistakable thump 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 of a DJ testing his equipment from inside my barn. My barn. The one I owned. The one absolutely no one had asked to use. A slow, icy wave of irritation, sharp and unwelcome, washed over me as I placed my mug down more firmly. This wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. This felt like a full-blown invasion. I wasn't part of the nearby homeowners association, the dreaded HOA, yet somehow, their brand of suburban chaos always seemed to spill onto my little slice of rural peace. And today? Today felt like a new, spectacularly audacious low. See, I live on a few acres of land, just beyond the HOA's tyrannical reach. My property isn't subject to their endless list of rules and regulations, which, unfortunately, makes me a frequent target for their self-important president. Let's call her Beverly. Beverly is the kind of person who treats the HOA like her own personal fiefdom, complete with arbitrary fines, endless complaints about perfectly manicured lawns. Mine is decidedly unmanicured, and an uncanny ability to strong-arm anyone into bending to her will. But this? A full-scale wedding setup? This was a whole new level of breathtaking entitlement. My curiosity, battling fiercely with my rising annoyance, finally won out. I grabbed my well-worn baseball cap from the coat rack and started walking towards the barn, my boots crunching on the gravel driveway. As I got closer, snippets of conversation drifted on the gentle morning breeze. "The rustic aesthetic is just perfect," someone gushed in a tone dripping with saccharine enthusiasm. "The bride is going to absolutely love it." Then another voice, laced with anxiety, "We have to be extra careful with the cake. I heard the couple spent a fortune on it." I stopped dead in my tracks, a knot forming in my stomach. The bride? Doesn't know? This wasn't just Beverly throwing some impromptu community potluck. This was an actual, legitimate wedding, and from the sound of it, the poor couple had absolutely no idea that their chosen venue wasn't exactly legitimate. Just as I reached the massive wooden barn doors, a woman with a clipboard clutched in her hand and a Bluetooth headset perched precariously on her ear intercepted me. She had that distinctly frazzled, overworked look of someone who'd been juggling far too many details all morning. "Excuse me, sir," she said, barely glancing up from her extensive checklist. "This area is for staff only until after the ceremony." I crossed my arms, the irritation now bubbling into outright anger. "That's interesting, considering this is my barn." That got her attention. She blinked, her brow furrowing in confusion as she finally looked up at me. I don't understand." "I own this property," I stated, gesturing around at the unfolding wedding spectacle. "No one asked me for permission to use my barn." Her eyes widened in dawning horror. "Wait. You're the owner? I was told this venue was reserved months ago." "By whom?" I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear her say it, to solidify the sheer audacity of the situation. "The woman from the HOA. Beverly?" "Something like that," she said quickly, her fingers frantically flipping through the pages on her clipboard. "She handled all the arrangements." "Oh, of course she did," I muttered under my breath, taking a slow, deep breath to try and quell the urge to unleash a torrent of colorful language. I dealt with Beverly's overreach before, usually involving passive-aggressive notes about the length of my grass or the unacceptable state of my fence. But this was actual, blatant fraud. and right as I was teetering on the edge of deciding whether to start dramatically flipping tables or just call the sheriff, I heard another voice. "Excuse me? What's going on here?" I turned to see a young couple stepping out of a sleek sedan. The bride, radiant in anticipation, was carefully clutching a garment bag that likely held her wedding dress. The groom, looking sharp in a tailored suit, was adjusting his cuff links, glancing between me and the flustered wedding planner with mild confusion. The planner hesitated, clearly panicking. I'm just sorting something out with the venue owner." The bride beamed, her face lighting up. "Oh, you must be the owner. Thank you so much for letting us use your beautiful barn." My jaw tightened. I wasn't about to completely ruin their day without absolute proof, but they deserved to know the truth. "I don't think you understand," I said carefully, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. "I never agreed to host this wedding." The bride laughed, a nervous, uncertain sound. "Oh, that can't be right," Beverly said. "Beverly Lead," I interrupted, my voice now firm. "I was never asked about this. I was never paid. No one had permission to set foot on my land." The words hit them like a physical blow. The bride's smile vanished, her face draining of color as shock registered in her eyes. The groom's jaw clenched, his initial confusion hardening into anger. "What do you mean you were never paid?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I folded my arms, the cold wave of irritation returning, stronger than before. "I mean that unless you wrote me a check personally, your venue was stolen." The bride started to tremble, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We paid Beverly $10,000 for this venue." $10,000. That was the moment I knew Beverly had truly crossed a line, messed up beyond any hope of polite reconciliation. But before I could even formulate a response, the woman herself appeared, gliding into the scene with her usual smug expression, like she was gracing us with her royal presence. "What's with all the commotion?" she chirped, giving the bride a sickeningly warm smile before turning her icy gaze on me. "Oh, you're here. Of course you are. Of course I'm here, Beverly. It's my land." She waved a dismissive hand, her perfectly coiffed hair barely moving. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, narrator's name. This is a community event. It's for a good cause." The groom turned to her sharply, his voice filled with disbelief and fury. "Beverly, did you take our money without actually securing the venue?" Beverly's smile twitched, a flicker of something akin to fear crossing her eyes before she quickly masked it. "Don't be ridiculous, groom's name. Everything is under control." "It really isn't," I said, stepping closer to her, my voice low and menacing. "Beverly, you forged a venue rental agreement on land you don't own. That's fraud, and trespassing, and a lawsuit waiting to happen." The bride, now on the verge of tears, grabbed her fiancé's arm, her voice trembling. "What are we supposed to do? Our guests are arriving. We don't have another venue." Beverly scoffed, brushing imaginary dust off her impeccably tailored blazer. "Oh, stop whining, bride's name. He won't do anything. He's bluffing." She turned to me with a condescending sneer. "What are you really going to do, narrator's name? Kick out a wedding? That would make you look so bad." I tilted my head, a slow smile spreading across my face. "You really think I won't?" Beverly smirked, utterly confident in her ability to manipulate me. "You wouldn't dare." That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to call the sheriff. Oh no. Beverly wanted to play games? She wanted to challenge me, to take advantage of my generally easygoing nature and assume I'd simply roll over? Well, she was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. I turned on my heel and started walking towards the back of my property. Because if she thought I wouldn't do anything, she clearly didn't know about my goats. I walked away from the rising tide of chaos unfolding in front of my barn, but I wasn't abandoning the situation. Oh no. I had a plan, one that involved my most enthusiastic residents. But first, I needed to see just how deep Beverly's web of lies truly went. Behind me, voices rose in panic. The wedding planner was frantically flipping through her paperwork, her face a mask of sheer terror. The bride was on the verge of a complete meltdown, tears threatening to spill down her perfectly made-up face. And the groom? He was beginning to put the pieces together, the realization of Beverly's deception dawning on him. The guests were starting to arrive, smiling and chatting, completely oblivious to the impending disaster that was about to engulf their perfect barn wedding. I took a deep breath, turned back around, and marched right into the center of the gathering. Time to confront Beverly directly. "Beverly!" I called out, my voice sharp and cutting through the rising murmurs of confusion and alarm. She was already smoothing down her dress, her expression suggesting this was a minor inconvenience rather than the monumental act of fraud she had committed. "What now, narrator's name?" she huffed, rolling her eyes as if I were the one causing the problem. "What exactly did you tell this couple?" I asked, folding my arms across my chest, my gaze unwavering. She scoffed, her arrogance returning full force. "That they had a beautiful venue at a fantastic price, of course. And they do. You're just making a scene." The groom stepped forward, his voice tight with barely suppressed fury. "Beverly, we paid you $10,000. You said everything was handled. Did you ever have permission to use this barn?" Beverly put a hand to her chest, feigning offense at the very accusation. "Of course I did. I've been running the HOA for years. I have access to all sorts of community resources." I snorted, unable to contain my disbelief. "Beverly, my farm is not part of your HOA." Her eye twitched, a brief flash of panic in her eyes, but she quickly plastered on a look of indignant innocence. "Oh, don't be ridiculous, narrator's name. You've lived next to us for so long. What's a little cooperation?" "Cooperation?" I repeated incredulously. "You literally stole my property for an event I had no knowledge of. You didn't just borrow the space, Beverly. You sold it. That's fraud." She huffed, folding her arms in a mirror image of my stance, though her posture lacked any real authority. "Oh, please. You wouldn't even use this barn for anything important. It's perfect for a wedding. I did you a favor, honestly." The bride let out a choked sob, and the groom rubbed his face, trying to process the sheer audacity of Beverly's lies. "Beverly's name," he snapped, his voice trembling with anger. "You lied to us. You took our money, pretended to book a venue, and just hoped he wouldn't notice?" Beverly waved a dismissive hand, completely unrepentant. "Oh, stop being so dramatic, groom's name. The wedding's already set up. He's not actually going to throw everyone out." I smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips that I knew would send a shiver of unease down her spine. "You're right, Beverly." She smirked, her confidence returning. "See? I'm not going to throw everyone out," I continued, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. "I'm just going to let my goat in." Her face fell, her smug expression crumbling into utter disbelief. "Wait. What?" I turned towards the back of my property, a mischievous glint in my eye. "You're right, Beverly. I was going to call the sheriff, but honestly, that would take too long. Instead, I think I'll let nature handle this one." She sputtered, her voice rising in pitch. "You wouldn't dare." The groom stared at me, a flicker of bewildered hope in his eyes. You have goats?" 17 of them, I replied casually, a hint of wicked glee in my voice. "And they love new places to explore." Beverly turned to me, her eyes wide with genuine fear for the first time. "You let those things roam free?" "Oh, not usually," I said, a disingenuous look of innocence on my face. "But since you were kind enough to open my barn to guests, I think they deserve to be part of the fun." The wedding planner let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "He's joking, right?" I smiled, a wide, genuine smile this time. "Nope." Then I turned and started walking. Behind me, I heard Beverly scrambling, her voice shrill with panic. "This is ridiculous. I rented the space." "No, you stole it," I corrected without looking back, "and now you're about to see why that was a terrible idea." I reached the fenced-off area where my goats were kept. They perked up immediately, sensing an opportunity for adventure. My biggest goat, a boisterous fellow named Attila, stopped his hooves expectantly. He lived for new explorations. I unlatched the gate, and the stampede began. From behind me, I heard the first shriek of horror as my goats charged towards the barn, their tails wagging with unbridled enthusiasm, their tongues flicking out in anticipation of any edible morsel they might find. They scattered in joyous disarray, some heading straight for the meticulously arranged buffet table, others gleefully knocking over delicate floral decorations. The bride let out a strangled wail as Attila, with a particularly aggressive lunge, launched himself at the towering wedding cake, devouring the intricate frosting details in one glorious, messy chomp. A guest screamed as Attila made eye contact and headbutted a pristine white folding chair, sending it flying across the manicured lawn. Another goat, a curious little thing named Nibbles, grabbed the groom's tie, giving it an experimental tug. The DJ's speakers crackled ominously as one of my more adventurous goats decided the colorful chords looked particularly delicious. Pandemonium. Utter, glorious pandemonium. Beverly's shriek of rage could have shattered glass. "Stop them! Stop them right now!" I crossed my arms, leaning against a nearby tree, a picture of calm amidst the goat-induced chaos. "Not my problem, Beverly. You rented the space, remember? It's your responsibility now." She whirled on me, her face livid, contorted with fury. "You absolute lunatic! You're ruining a wedding." I raised an eyebrow, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "No, you ruined a wedding. I'm just reclaiming my barn." The groom, who had been trying to untangle his tie from Nibbles' persistent gnawing, finally lost it. "I can't believe this," he muttered, turning to his bride, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "We got scammed. Beverly took our money, gave us a stolen venue, and now we're goat food." The bride, still in shock, whispered, her voice barely audible, "We're suing her." Beverly snapped her head towards them, her eyes blazing. "Excuse me?" The bride's eyes were ice cold now, the shock giving way to righteous fury. "No, excuse me, Beverly. You lied to us. You scammed us. And now you've ruined our entire wedding. You better believe we're taking you to court." Beverly's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her usual composure completely shattered. The wedding guests had all scattered, some frantically trying to capture the unbelievable chaos on their phones, others running for safety, their elegant attire proving no match for the farmyard invasion. The buffet was a disaster, decorations lay in tatters, and just then, the flashing lights of a sheriff's car appeared at the end of my driveway. The moment Beverly saw the flashing lights, her bravado crumbled. I smirked. "Oh look, Beverly. The real party guests are here." Two deputies stepped out of the car, surveying the scene with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. One looked at the half-eaten wedding cake, the other glanced at Attila, who was still happily munching on a chair. The first deputy sighed. "Okay, what exactly is happening here?" I leaned against the barn, gesturing to the utter devastation. "Well, officer, these folks trespassed onto my property and set up a wedding without my permission. I figured I'd let my natural security system handle it." The deputy rubbed his temples, a weary expression on his face. "So you're saying this isn't a wedding venue?" "I am saying calmly that this entire event is illegal," I confirmed. The bride wasted no time, her voice trembling with indignation. "She took our money. She scammed us." She pointed directly at Beverly, her face full of righteous fury. The deputy turned to Beverly. "Ma'am, do you have a legal contract with the property owner?" Beverly opened her mouth, floundering for an explanation. I, this is a misunderstanding. We had an agreement." I pulled out my property deed, handing it to the deputy. "Not with me, you didn't." Beverly paled, her carefully applied makeup suddenly looking garish under the flashing lights. The deputy frowned. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Beverly let out a strangled sound, caught somewhere between rage and desperation. And as she was cuffed and led towards the patrol car, my goat Attila took one final, triumphant bite out of the wedding cake for good measure. Perfect timing. As the deputies escorted Beverly towards their patrol car, the goat-induced chaos inside the barn continued its glorious reign. My goats, now fully unleashed, were living their absolute best lives. The guests? Not so much. Attila, my largest and most enthusiastic goat, had just polished off a significant portion of the wedding cake and was now eyeing the buffet table with the focused intensity of a seasoned gourmand. He stomped forward with unshakable confidence, his hooves clattering against the barn floor. One of the catering staff, looking utterly defeated, tried to block his path. "No, no, no. That's not for you." Too late. With one swift, decisive headbutt, Attila sent an entire platter of meticulously arranged artisanal cheeses and crackers flying through the air. The tray flipped mid-air, scattering food like bizarre, savory confetti. Several guests shrieked, diving out of the way to avoid the airborne delicacies. Another goat, the aforementioned Nibbles, had discovered a towering display of champagne glasses. With an almost artistic lack of care, he reared up on his hind legs and knocked the entire thing over with a satisfying crash. The barn floor was instantly awash in a sticky mix of bubbly and shattered glass. The DJ, still desperately trying to protect his expensive equipment, was now attempting to gently herd two smaller goats away from a tangle of speaker wires, waving his arms frantically and muttering under his breath. Suddenly, a new voice, sharp and laced with exasperation, cut through the madness. "Somebody get these beasts out of here." The mother of the bride stood in the center of the barn, her once elegant lavender dress now splattered with frosting and what suspiciously looked like goat drool. Her elaborate hat was askew, and her pearl necklace rattled with every frustrated gesture. The bride herself stood frozen near the makeshift altar, her face an unreadable mask of shock and disbelief. The groom was still engaged in a low-stakes tug-of-war with Nibbles, who refused to relinquish his prize tie. The remaining guests had completely abandoned the idea of a peaceful ceremony. Some were recording the unbelievable scene on their phones, while others had already retreated to the parking lot, their high heels and tailored suits proving utterly inadequate for a farmyard invasion. Beverly, now securely handcuffed in the back of the patrol car, was still trying to argue with the deputies, her voice rising in a frantic shriek. "You don't understand. I'm the HOA president. This is an important community event." One of the deputies glanced at me, a wry smile on his face. "She does this kind of thing a lot, huh?" I smirked. "Oh, you have no idea." Beverly whirled on me, her face contorted with rage. "Narrator's name, you're a monster. You just ruined these poor kids' wedding." I arched an eyebrow. "I ruined it? You mean you, the person who stole $10,000 from them, lied about having a venue, and thought I'd just go along with it? I was helping them," she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. The groom finally lost his remaining shred of composure. "Beverly's name, shut up." Silence descended, thick and heavy. Even the goats seemed momentarily stunned by the outburst. Beverly's mouth fell open in shock. The bride wiped at her eyes, a flicker of something akin to determination replacing the shock on her face. She turned to me, her voice small and hesitant. Is there any way we can still have our wedding?" I looked around the barn. It was, to put it mildly, a disaster zone. The buffet looked like it had been hit by a tiny, four-legged tornado. The decorations were chewed, trampled, or outright devoured. But the people who mattered were still here. The bride and groom, while clearly traumatized, were standing together, a newfound resolve in their eyes. The guests who remained had that look, the one that said, "This is a catastrophe, but it's also kind of hilarious." And my goats? Well, they had definitely made their presence known. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Look, I said, trying to sound reassuring despite the utter absurdity of the situation. If you're still willing to roll with the punches, I can try to salvage something. The bride blinked, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief. You'd let us stay? I shrugged. It's my barn. If you're willing to help clean up and accept a more rustic experience, we might be able to turn this around. The groom looked at the bride, a question in his eyes. You okay with that, bride's name? She sniffled, then slowly nodded, a small, determined smile gracing her lips. Yeah, she said, her voice gaining strength. Yeah, I think I'm the DJ, still clutching a precious speaker wire, shouted from the corner, his voice laced with a hint of manic energy. If we can keep the goats off my equipment, I can still play music. A groomsman, who had previously been hiding behind an overturned table, raised a bottle of champagne, a wide, slightly manic grin on his face. Honestly, this is already the most memorable wedding I've ever been to. A hesitant ripple of laughter spread through the remaining guests. The mother of the bride, who had been teetering on the brink of a full-blown meltdown, looked at her daughter, her expression softening. Sweetheart, are you sure? The bride smiled through her tears, a genuine, heartfelt smile this time. Honestly, Mom? At this point, why not? That was all the confirmation I needed. I clapped my hands together, a surge of unexpected energy coursing through me. All right, folks. If we're doing this, we need to clean up first. First order of business, round up my goats. What followed was a truly absurd scene. The wedding guests, still dressed in their formal attire, scrambled to wrangle my surprisingly agile goats. A bridesmaid in sky-high heels chased after Nibbles, who still had a mouthful of stolen wedding flowers. The best man and a couple of groomsmen teamed up to try and lift Attila, who was stubbornly refusing to leave the remnants of the buffet table. The flower girl, who had somehow managed to befriend one of the smaller goats, was now gently leading it back towards its pen, her face radiating pure, unadulterated joy, like this was the best day of her life. And Beverly? Well, she was still handcuffed in the back of the patrol car, foaming at the mouth as she watched her stolen wedding miraculously recover without her. This isn't how it was supposed to go, she screeched, her voice muffled by the closed car window. The deputy shook his head wearily. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. Might want to use it. With a final, dramatic wail, Beverly was loaded into the patrol car. Meanwhile, inside the barn, the atmosphere had completely shifted. With the goats mostly wrangled, the guests started rearranging the remaining tables, a sense of camaraderie and shared absurdity filling the air. The DJ tested his speakers, a surprisingly upbeat tune filling the barn. And the best man, who had apparently decided to fully embrace the chaos, started passing out drinks like this was a wild, impromptu party instead of a near catastrophe. The bride walked up to me, still looking a little dazed but with a genuine smile on her face. I don't even know how to thank you, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. I chuckled. Well, I did let a herd of goats crash your wedding, so. She laughed, a bright, genuine sound. Honestly, that's the best thing that could have happened. I grinned. In that case, congratulations! You're officially having the first goat wedding in this barn's history. And as the sun started to set, casting a golden glow through the slightly damaged barn, with music playing, drinks flowing, and absolutely zero Beverlys in sight, I had to admit, maybe this wedding would turn out perfect after all. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the barn as the unexpected wedding festivities continued. The chaos of the afternoon had somehow transformed into an unforgettable, rustic celebration, one that the guests would be talking about for years to come. But while the bride and groom were salvaging their big day, there was still one loose end to tie up, Beverly. I turned towards the sheriff's car, where she sat in the back seat, seething with impotent rage. The deputies were finishing up their paperwork, and from the look on her face, the reality of her situation had finally started to sink in. She was in serious trouble. The deputy nearest to me sighed as he clicked his pen shut. All right, narrator's name, he said, rubbing his temples wearily. "Here's the deal. We've got her on trespassing and fraud. That phony venue contract alone is enough to charge her. And considering she took $10,000 from the couple under false pretenses? Yeah, she's in deep." I crossed my arms, a feeling of satisfaction washing over me. Good. She's been pulling this queen of the HOA act for years. It's about time she faced some consequences. The bride and groom had walked up beside me, listening intently. The groom, who had been simmering with anger for hours, finally let out a slow, deliberate breath. "We are pressing charges," he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. Beverly lunged against the car door, her face pressed against the window like an unhinged cartoon villain. "You can't do this to me!" she shrieked, her voice muffled by the glass. "I was helping you." The bride gave her a look of absolute disgust. "Helping us? Beverly, you lied to us. You stole our money. You left us venue-less on our wedding day." Beverly scoffed, her nose in the air despite her current predicament. "Oh, please. It still turned out fine. Just let it go and enjoy your day." The groom clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. "You think we're just going to let it go? You took $10,000 from us. That was our honeymoon money." Beverly blinked, momentarily stunned. "Wait. You don't have more money?" The bride threw up her hands in exasperation. "What do you think? We saved for years for this wedding, and you stole from us like it was nothing." Beverly's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that almost resembled regret. But then, just as quickly, her usual air of entitlement returned. "Well," she huffed, tossing her head as much as the handcuffs would allow, "it's not my fault you didn't have a backup plan." The bride lunged forward, her anger threatening to boil over, and I barely managed to put an arm out to gently restrain her. The deputy cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention back to the matter at hand. "Okay, before things really get out of hand, Beverly, you're being charged with fraud, trespassing, and..." He glanced back at the wedding planner, who was standing nearby with her arms crossed, looking like she was contemplating early retirement. "Looks like we might be adding additional charges once we look into this phony contract." Beverly's face twisted in a mask of pure rage. "This is ridiculous. I'll have you know that I'm a respected figure in this community." The deputy deadpanned, "Ma'am, we literally just arrested you in front of half the neighborhood." At that moment, a new voice joined the conversation. Well, well, well. What do we have here?" A small group of HOA board members had arrived, led by none other than Beverly's longtime nemesis, a no-nonsense woman named Eleanor who had been patiently waiting for an opportunity to take Beverly down. Eleanor adjusted her glasses, looking far too pleased with the unfolding drama. "Beverly," she drawled, her voice dripping with barely concealed satisfaction, "you do realize that HOA funds cannot be used for personal profit, right?" Beverly went rigid, her eyes widening in alarm. "What are you talking about, Eleanor?" Eleanor smiled sweetly, a truly terrifying sight. "Oh, you didn't think we'd notice that very large transaction you moved from the HOA Community Fund last month? You know, the exact amount you scammed from this lovely couple?" Beverly bland, her carefully constructed facade finally cracking. That's different." "That was." "Oh, it's very different," Eleanor said smoothly, cutting her off. "Because you just embezzled from the HOA." Beverly let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a scream. The deputy glanced at Eleanor, then back at Beverly. "Ma'am, is there anything legal about what you've done in the past few months?" Beverly's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The groom, his arms still crossed, exhaled sharply, a sense of grim satisfaction on his face. "I want every penny back," he stated firmly. "Oh, you'll be getting more than that," Eleanor said, still looking far too smug. "Because once the board officially removes her as HOA president, we'll be suing her too." Beverly let out an actual screech of pure, unadulterated fury. You can't do this to me. The deputy sighed, closing his notepad. All right, I think we're done here. Let's get her out of here before she bursts a blood vessel. The wedding guests, who had been not so subtly watching the entire exchange from the sidelines, erupted in cheers as the sheriff's car finally pulled away, taking Beverly and her fraudulent queen of the HOA nonsense with it. The bride turned to me, shaking her head in utter disbelief. I still can't believe this happened. I gave her a lopsided grin. Honestly? I can. But hey, at least your wedding is now officially the most legendary event this town has ever seen. The groom chuckled, finally letting go of some of his pent-up frustration. Yeah, and honestly, this was so much better than some stuffy, fancy venue. The DJ threw a hand in the air, a wide grin on his face. Are we partying or what? The remaining guests roared in approval, and just like that, the music kicked back on. The bride and groom, finally able to breathe without the suffocating weight of Beverly's deception, joined their guests as the wedding miraculously continued. Eleanor patted my arm, a genuine smile on her face. You know, narrator's name, I think you just did this town a huge favor. I smirked. All in a day's work. Though I will be charging a goat security fee if anyone else tries this nonsense. She laughed, a hearty, genuine laugh. Fair enough. And as I stood back, watching the absolute mess that had somehow transformed into a wedding celebration, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. Beverly was gone. Justice had been served. And most importantly, Attila got to eat an entire wedding cake. A win-win for everyone, in my book. The party raged on well into the night, and against all odds, the wedding was a resounding success. The guests, once horrified by the goat invasion, had fully embraced the chaos, their initial shock giving way to laughter and a shared sense of unforgettable experience. People danced inside the barn, sipping drinks that had miraculously survived the earlier catastrophe. The DJ, who had managed to protect most of his equipment from my enthusiastic goats, was blasting music like nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Even the bride and groom, after the most disastrous start to their wedding day imaginable, were laughing, holding each other close on the makeshift dance floor, and genuinely enjoying themselves. I stood off to the side, watching the scene unfold with a quiet smirk. If you had told me this morning that my barn would be the hottest party spot in town tonight, I would have called you absolutely crazy. But somehow, this absolute mess had turned into a one-of-a-kind wedding, one that no one who was there would ever forget. Eleanor, the now de facto head of the HOA board, wandered up beside me, sipping from a glass of champagne she had probably rescued from the wreckage. You really outdid yourself, narrator's name, she said, nudging me playfully with her elbow. Who knew a goat stampede would be exactly what this town needed? I chuckled. You mean exactly what Beverly needed? She grinned, a knowing look in her eyes. Oh, absolutely. Speaking of Beverly, I turned my gaze towards the now very Beverly-free wedding and let out a satisfied sigh. The HOA had officially removed her as president. Turns out, embezzling HOA funds is a fantastic way to lose both your position and your standing in the community. The moment word got out that she had stolen money not just from the bride and groom but also from the HOA itself, she lost every ounce of the power she had so gleefully wielded for so long. In fact, I heard she was already packing up to move out of the neighborhood. The HOA had voted her out, and without her precious title, she wasn't sticking around. Think she'll end up in jail? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Eleanor swirled her drink thoughtfully. Doubtful, but she'll definitely be in court for a while. The HOA is suing her for the money she misused, the bride and groom are suing her for fraud, and the wedding planner might press charges too. I smirked. That's good enough for me. Attila, still happily digesting what had to be at least half of the wedding cake, trotted up and nudged my leg affectionately. Eleanor grinned. You know, narrator's name, you really should start charging people for goat security. I think you've got a solid business model. I scratched Attila behind his ears. You know, Eleanor, That's not a bad idea. The bride and groom, still dressed in their slightly disheveled wedding attire, made their way over to me, hand in hand. The bride had finally relaxed, her face still glowing with the remnants of laughter and adrenaline. "I still don't know how to thank you," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I mean, I know you didn't exactly plan for this to happen, but you saved our wedding. In a really, really weird way." I chuckled. I'll admit, this wasn't exactly how I planned to spend my Saturday, but hey, I wasn't about to let Beverly get away with it. The groom nodded, a genuine smile on his face. "And honestly, this turned out way better than I ever expected. I mean, we got scammed, then our wedding got destroyed by goats, but somehow it was perfect." The bride grinned, her eyes sparkling. "Legendary, actually." I grinned back. "So, does that mean I get to put goat wedding coordinator on my resume?" The groom laughed, a hearty, genuine sound. "Absolutely. And if you ever want to rent out this barn for real, let us know. We'll recommend you to everyone." I smirked. "I'll consider it. But next time, it's a strict no Beverly policy." The bride held up her drink in a silent toast to a Beverly-free future. Eleanor, the groom, and a few nearby guests lifted their glasses in agreement. The music shifted to a slower, more romantic song, and the couple moved towards the makeshift dance floor, the space once covered in chaos now magically transformed into something beautiful and intimate. I watched them for a moment, a feeling of warmth spreading through me, then turned back to my barn. It was a little worse for wear, but honestly, it had seen worse. And at the end of the day, it had survived Beverly, which was more than most people in this town could say. As the party continued, a few of the remaining guests started tentatively mingling with the goats, snapping photos and laughing as Attila once again tried to steal someone's drink. It hit me then, this wedding, for all its disasters, had turned into something truly special. And I had a feeling that years from now, when people talked about the greatest weddings they'd ever been to, this one would be at the very top of the list. I let out a long breath, finally feeling the tension from the day leave my shoulders. The stars were out now, the air was crisp, and the sounds of laughter and music filled the night. Beverly was gone, the HOA had been purged of its tyrannical leader, the wedding had been saved in the most unexpected way possible, and best of all, Attila had finally passed out from his epic wedding cake food coma. I clapped my hands together, feeling nothing but pure satisfaction. "Yep," I muttered to myself, a wide grin spreading across my face. "Best wedding ever." And with that, I turned and walked towards the barn, where I suspected one last piece of cake was waiting for me. Because honestly, after today, I had definitely earned it. Valuable lesson: sometimes, when faced with blatant disrespect and entitlement, a little bit of unexpected chaos can be the most effective form of justice. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself and your property, even if it means unleashing a herd of hungry goats. What would you have done if Beverly stole your barn for a wedding? Would you have unleashed the goats, or done something even more outrageous? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this story of epic payback and goat-fueled justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel for more crazy HOA stories and tales of legendary neighborly disputes, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single one.